Good afternoon and welcome to your weekly FX options report. Today is Wednesday, August 3rd, 2011. In midweek trade, the major U.S. stock averages continue to extend losses. The Dow, Nasdaq, and S&P 500 all closed lower by over 2% on Tuesday. Now, on Tuesday, August 2nd, both the Senate as well as House passed the vote, and President Barack Obama signed into law the bill to cut the U.S. deficit as well as to raise the debt cap. And meanwhile, Moody's and Fitch confirmed the AAA rating on the United States, but the risk does remain in terms of future downgrades. Now, shifting our focus on over to U.S. economic data releases ahead of the big jobs report, which will be coming out on Friday. The ADP employment report showed that the private sector added 114,000 jobs in July. At the same time, the Challenger job cut report showed that during the month of July, there were 66,000 job cuts. Over in the Eurozone, sovereign debt concerns do remain, but the latest retail sales report did come in better than expected. And on to the spot FX market, the US dollar is seeing mixed trading in midweek trade. The dollar is lower against the euro, pound, and yen, but higher against the commodity currencies of the Aussie, Kiwi, and the CAD. Meanwhile, the Swiss National Bank has intervened and cut interest rates for the nation. As a result, the Swissy has paired recent gains against the major currencies. Now, one way to trade your views on US dollars' strength or weakness is to take a look at IC's FX options. One advantage is that they are US dollar denominated. For more information, you can go to www.fxoptions.com. And in our next segment, which is your daily trend report, we'll take a look at the other major ICFX option pairs, starting out with the AUX, the US dollar against the Aussie. Now, for that pair, it is under pressure and the downside does prevail. Now, the AUX has validated a rising wedge pattern, and it does call for a decline. Therefore, the preference of trading such analysts for the AUX is short positions below 95 with targets coming in at 89.15 and 85.35 in extension. And moving on to the BPX, the US dollar against the British pound, that pair is also under pressure. Now, it is currently challenging its support, and therefore the preference of trading central analysts for the BPX is short positions below 63 with targets coming in at 60.50 and 59.75 in extension. For the CDD, the US currency against the CAD, the downside prevails. The RSI is mixed with a bearish bias, and therefore the preference of trading central analysts for the CDD is short positions below 97.50 with targets coming in at 93 and 90 in extension. Moving on to the EUI, the US dollar against the euro, the downside does prevail. Now, the pair is posting a rebound and stands below its resistance. The preference of trading central analysts for the EUI short positions below 72 with targets coming in at 68 and 67 in extension. For the SFC, the US dollar against the Swiss franc, the downside also prevails. Now, for that pair, the RSI is capped by declining trendline, and it does remain within a bearish channel, and it is currently challenging its support. Therefore, the preference of trading central analysts is short positions below 83, with targets coming in at 75 and 73.40 in extension. Last but not least, for this segment, let's take a look at the YUK, the US dollar against the yen. Now, that pair is also under pressure, and it is pushing below its previous low. Therefore, the preference of trading central analysts is short positions below 79.80, with targets coming in at 75 and 74.15 in extension. Now, moving on to your weekly trend opinion for the major ICFX option pairs, the US dollar is regaining strength against the majors, but the US currency's medium-term outlook does remain on the downside. Moving on to your portfolio performance since its inception, which was in August of 2007, it is higher by 2,558.80%. And since the beginning of this year, it is higher by 723.76%. Now, this week we do have two trade alerts for you, including considering puts on the SFC and puts on the SK. Now, starting out with that first trade alert, which is the puts on the SFC, the pair does remain within a bearish, medium-term bearish channel, and the daily RSI for the SFC is also capped by declining trend line. For the SKA, the US dollar against the Swedish krona, that has validated a bearish flag and should reach its previous low. This week, the BPX, EUI, as well as the YUK will be closely watched. And moving on to next week with the major ICFX option pairs, the CDD, AUX, the MCD, and the PZO will be closely watched. Now, starting out with the CDD, the dollar against the CAD, it is rebounding, but it does stand below its resistance at 97.50. And for the AUX, it is pulling back on its resistance at the 95 level ahead of further expected weakness. For the NZD, the dollar against the Kiwi, it does remain strongly bearish and below the resistance level at 122.50. And regarding the PCO, the US dollar against the Mexican peso, it is rebounding but remains below its resistance at the 120 level. And that does wrap it up for this week's FX Options Report. Make sure to tune in next Wednesday for your latest update. Thanks for watching and have a great day.